Hi, I'm Dr. Claire Steffen, and I'm here today to talk with you a little bit more about cognitions of choice. And today we're going to specifically focus on the behavior of considering options and how to develop that trait. Here's a little bit about my background. Those of you who have seen some of my sessions previously know that I am trained as a psychologist, a certified drug and alcohol counselor, and I also am trained in wellness and a life wellness and business coach. For more than 30 years, I've been working in the fields of education and therapy and coaching, and I've worked with all different kinds of people in many, many different settings. So today we're looking at specific behavior around dispositions and traits that drive choices. And so when we think about, the characteristics that we want to develop around making choice, some of this is really about the disposition that we have in our way of being. And so when we look at traits, we could be looking at our abilities, such as the skills that we possess. It entails our thinking styles, our learning styles, as well as our strengths or limitations, but it's also part of our personality structure. And so these traits can be characteristics that we can develop or, kind of become an accentuated part of who we are. And they are the qualities that define us. And it also can be part of the way that we perceive things and our view of the world. So we can, develop these dispositional traits, and they can become part of our strengths. And as a result, it can be part of our philosophy for living. And so if we want to make changes in life, focusing on developing these traits can help us design this philosophy for living. And also we can acquire the skills that will allow us to make new choices. And so the process that I have developed here is a way for us to invite, investigate, and initiate change by developing these dispositional traits. And so, many of us experience stress in the day-to-day living, and sometimes it's in our relationships. So being able to make healthier choices is certainly a way to reduce stress. We want to be able to work on how do we make our choices in life and really to develop the strengths of these traits, because it is a very much more efficient way, to operate and use our brain. And so we can process much more effectively. And by creating this a philosophy for living, we can design a wellness approach to our life. I've explained in previous sessions that, I have designed a levels of choice approach. And it's not so much that everything happens in such a discrete way and that we process everything from top to bottom in a levels way. It's more a didactic way of understanding this because everything happens around us really in a much more radial perspective, or dimensional way. And so I think it's important to understand that the way the brain works is if we apply the as-if principle, even if we haven't totally accepted these changes that we're trying to institute in our life, by thinking about it as if, it allows our brain to make that shift and make it easier for us to be able to, accept the changes that come in life. And so sometimes we engage thinking in such a critical way that we can create obstacles to our own thinking. And so what I'm approaching here is a way to be able to change some of that critical thinking that is involved in barrier thinking or gets in the way. But we can also be thinking about critical thinking as a way that we apply logic, or the way that we think it through. I believe we can also utilize a creative thinking process to open that channel within our brain to be able to explore opportunities or other ways of being. So that by doing that, we can connect to ourselves and to others at a much deeper level. And it allows us to develop the skills we need to think about our choices in a conscious way rather than just automatically respond. The other thing I like to introduce is the idea of universality. That each of us represents a different being, and that, there are cultural elements that affect that, and there are socioeconomic, influences. There's many different aspects of being human that make us different from one another. But if we approach one another in a loving and accepting way, it allows us to have a little bit more freedom in the way that we design our choices in life. So back to this idea about levels of choice. The very first level is to think about change as something that we're inviting. Change can be fearful for many of us, and so we become resistant to it. And so if you start to think of it as it's an invitation, it's an opportunity for us to do something different in life. I really like that approach because it opens your brain to accepting new ways of being. So this very first level mnemonic is that change happens as an opportunity to invite corrective experience. Now, a little while ago, I mentioned that sometimes we get stuck in thought patterns that are negative, or they're barriers to our being able to make choices that are healthy or what we really want in our lives. And so by thinking of these changes as an opportunity to invite, it takes away a little bit of that fear-based thinking. And so we can kind of restructure our thoughts and start to step back and have a different approach to it. So when you're working at this first level, where you're inviting change, we are looking at focusing on fear reduction. We're trying to develop the skills of being more assertive, and trying to create congruency between what we think and what we feel so that that choice is more congruent. And so I'm going to teach you today a little bit about how to apply the specific cognition of choice, which is considering options. And so at this level 1 goal, again, we're reducing fear. We're starting to develop the skills to be more assertive, and we want congruency between what we think and what we feel. And when we move to that second level, we're starting to be more investigative, and we're working at changing our approach by investigating, the opportunities that are presented to us, in which case change happens as an opportunity to investigate critical experience. And so critical experiences involving that critical thought process that is very much coming from a place of logic, and we tend to value that in our culture in ways that we think that that's better than perhaps a creative approach. It isn't always true, and we're not always truly logical. Sometimes our emotions get in the way of what we think and certainly what we feel. And so if we can step back a little bit and investigate that critical thinking process and what we're experiencing, then we have more of an opportunity to change and to create more choices in our life. So the goal in this case is to introduce more optimism, to be respectful of ourselves and others, and to truly allow ourselves to experience empowerment. And so, this is something that maybe in certain circumstances or situations may take a little time to develop. And certainly for all of us, we may be very skilled in one area of our life or one environment, and not so much in another, and so all of us can benefit from the ability to think about the way we process information and the choices that we make. So the third level is about initiating change. And again, as I said, we may be very good at initiating change in one relationship or one environment and not so much in another. So the mnemonic in this case is that conscious choice leads to hope and openness and to the initiation of creative empowerment. Because when we work from a creative brain, we're brainstorming, we're thinking in a much more open way. And it isn't always that we're creative in an artistic way where we're doing music or we're doing art. It may be creative problem solving, or it may be creative communication in the way that we listen to one another. So the goals at this level are that we are, really speaking from a much higher level. We're focused on developing that integrity inside of ourselves so that what we say matches what we do. We maintain dignity not only of ourselves but of other people, and that's a consistent philosophy as part of our approach to living. And we're really able to be much more resilient so that when things happen that would otherwise maybe throw us off our game a little bit, we're able to cope with it and adjust and adapt. And so that's the goals when we're working at that level 3. So what happens when we reject choice? We restrict that neural communication in our brain, and we lock down in a way that we can't think quite as clearly, and maybe it's that we're not thinking not only as logical, but we can't come up with the creative options to allow us to troubleshoot. And so we experience an imbalance in our thinking. And as a result, the outcomes of what we intended may not, go as well. And in the extreme, we may experience harm to self or others. We might engage in behaviors that are poor choices, such as drinking or using drugs, or making comments to a friend or a partner in a way that's hurtful. And so more impulsive kind of decision making when we reject choice. Because choice comes up as an opportunity for us to change. And so if we listen with an open mind and an open heart, then we can make much better choices. So really, as I said, we're concerned with developing a philosophy for living because that's our fallback position. No matter what situation we are in, if we have this philosophy for living, we know our mind. We know the way that we can approach problem solving. We know a way we can approach relationships. We know a way we can approach communication. And so as we develop this philosophy for living and we specifically focus on increasing, our strength or our ability around each of these cognitions of choice, then you open the portal for choice to occur. So here are some life choice examples and how you can focus on creating your philosophy for living. You can use it to create a healthy lifestyle. If you've experienced a health crisis, you can change your way of thinking and feeling about what this crisis meant and your response to it. It might be an opportunity for you to really make some healthy changes. You can use it to develop your identity. You can use it in relationships. You can analyze the way you approach, making a choice around partnering. If you create this philosophy for living, and maybe you start to look at people a little different. You look for these characteristics and these traits, and you value them differently. And so maybe the way you think about not only yourself, but others changes in your view of life changes as a result of developing a philosophy for living. It could impact your marriage. It could be used to change the way you parent. You might think differently about your career path as you change your philosophy for living and apply these cognitions of choice. If you're in a position of hiring others, you might start to look for some of these traits in people that you would choose to work in your environment. And maybe if you're a person who has been in a working environment where there's a threat of layoffs, this might help you be less anxious about that because you maybe have more confidence as a result of developing these traits and feeling that you have these strengths as not only a fallback position, but as a way of being. So here are some other examples that, maybe would be beneficial to apply this philosophy for living and utilize the cognitions of choice. When you make financial decisions, you might come from a different place if you're thinking about life differently, rather than being so much not just in the moment, because we do want to experience life in the present, but we don't want to be so much in the moment that we don't connect to our past and think about our future. You might consider the way you utilize social media if you utilize these philosophies for living that are, related to the cognitions of choice. Might influence where you decide to live, when you decide to retire. It can become part of your spiritual way of being And if you're a religious person, you might always think about these in the way that you connect to religious thought already, but you could go deeper and into a much more spiritual path by developing these traits in yourself. Also could open the way that you look at the differences in culture and people from another part of the world. Because we value things differently depending on where we come from. So I'm just showing this here again is the primary decision wheel, so that it allows us to make sustainable choices. And so when we're focused on just this very initial level, we're focused more on survival needs and hopefully health and wellness issues. We're concerned with creating balance in life, or that homeostasis. We need to have financial stability and environmental stability. And so this decision wheel can be utilized as you are working through choices that you make, and you specifically choose a cognition of choice to develop. You can also consider, what are these sustainable choices in my life, and how might this specific cognition of choice help me make sustainable choices. The secondary decision wheel is more about self-empowerment, where we focus on self-development, spiritual being, how we affiliate or connect to others, our choices around self-improvement, and what we desire versus what we need, which was part of that primary decision wheel. So you can see that, not only do we have the levels of choice, to consider in developing this philosophy for living, we could always be also thinking about the primary and secondary decision wheels. And so when we are presented with an opportunity, we can process it in a way that says, okay, is this really a primary choice, or is this a secondary choice? And am I in a place where I am just, thinking about this and inviting this choice, possible change, or am I really in a place where I'm starting to investigate it a little bit more? Or maybe I've developed enough skills around this that I'm already able to initiate change. And so each opportunity that comes along in life, we could be thinking about it from these various approaches, or kind of more of a radial or dimensional approach. So the tertiary or third decision wheel, it's more focused on recognition and achievement choices. So it might involve, getting more education or training. If you're a person, who doesn't necessarily want to work in a corporate structure, you might be looking at developing entrepreneurial pursuits. Could also involve choices you make socially, or if you're in a position of trying to advance in your work environment, you could utilize this decision wheel to be focused more on promotion or other changes within your work environment. So the decision wheel, as we go at the core, everything stems from relationships. Everything happens in a relational way in life, and we move outward. That initially we want to focus on primary decisions and being sustainable with meeting our needs, and then moving outward to a secondary process where we're focused on self-empowerment, and outwardly yet into that recognition, decision making area where we're focused on achievement. And so, we kind of move back and forth between these different types of decisions in life, and they're all important and significant. And they all interact in a relational way, because, as I said, everything is dimensional in life. So now we're going to look at what happens, when we are presented with a choice, and the types of choices that happen in life. There's so many different choices on the day-to-day. Some of them are small, some of them are larger choices, some of them, are really not so significant. Others are very complex and extremely significant. And so, some ways to consider the types of choices are, some of them involve what we desire or what we would like to make happen in life. Some choices are simple yes, no. Some of them involve options. We can also look at them from what's the best case scenario. And so we may not be really happy about all of the different choices we have, and maybe there's some disappointment in some choice situations, but it's important to remember that even under those circumstances, if we focus on the ability to make a choice and that we have choice, it can prevent us from getting too anxious or depressed or feeling locked in. There's also the winning choice, which would be the absolute best, circumstance that could come out of this. And there's a little bit of competition involved in focusing on winning choices, and so you think of things in a mindful way. You want to, live in the present and, really focus on being, but we're not totally void of competition in this world. And it isn't necessarily that competition is a bad thing. Sometimes it's really a good thing because it helps us develop our strengths. Some choices involve us being more assertive, and we can also focus on, developing choices that allow us to feel more empowered or improve our self-esteem, our connection or relationship to self. Certainly, we want all of these choices we make to be harmonious or to keep us in balance. Some choices involve others where it requires us to dig deep and be more empathetic, which is really part of the human experience and an important aspect of choices. Some choices you make are lifelong decisions. Some of them involve morality or spirituality. I'm sure there's many other types of choices that present themselves on the day-to-day or in our lives, but these are just some of, the more significant choices that we as humans deal with. I always like this mnemonic, when you present a choice or an opportunity, you can think of it from who will it involve, what will happen if I make a particular choice, where will it take me, or, where is it going, when will it happen, why is it important, and most importantly, how will I be able to make a change happen? So you can use this as a viewpoint, if you will, when you are considering choices in your life. You can just kind of use this little structured mnemonic to process the information that relates to the choice that you have to make. So as we get into the cognitions of choice, they can, in some cases, involve goals that you want to reach in life. Each of the cognitions of choice are presented with an aspirational goal, and that is what we aspire to be. But we also can focus on creating behavioral or measurable goals. And when we look at a behavioral goal, we can think of it from the perspective of how frequently does this occur, how long will it happen for, and the response time, how quickly we are able to respond to the choice that's presented, and what environment it occurs in. So you can start to track this behavior within yourself so that you can get an idea of how you're changing and be able to measure where your changes are happening and really make some decisions on how you want to continue. So you can review what changes have happened, set new goals, and continue to move forward. So as humans, we all experience thinking errors. Some people more than others. If you're struggling with mental health issues like depression or something else, these may come up more frequently. But it's just part of the human condition, and being aware of some of these thinking errors. And again, there's more than just these, but these are the probably most prevalent ones that happen. That you can start to use corrective measures, and the cognitions of choice can help you correct some of your thinking errors. And so, people do tend to focus on the negative and really not really think about all the different positive aspects of their life. And when they focus on the negative, they tend to be more depressed or anxious. And they can engage self-blame, and sometimes that's a learned process. And so the good news is if you've learned something, you can unlearn it. We're maybe prone to mind reading or trying to mental forecast of what we think is going to happen and believing it will happen just because we thought it. And so sometimes we engage in overgeneralizations, and that can really feed the fear, or we put in these unreal, idealistic kinds of ways of being and expect that we should be able to live up to them. So that should thinking can get in the way a lot. all or nothing thinking, that it's one way or another. We can, really focus on catastrophizing or emotional reasoning that says, I thought it, so it must be true. We can take things in such a personalized way that we lose sight of another person's perspective, their thoughts and feelings, and we may misread a situation and really be much too critical about the outcome because we're personalizing it. Or we can label things based on what we've learned socially. And again, we can really miss the mark because there's a lot of bias and prejudice that can happen with labeling. So if you kind of tuck this in the back of your brain that we are all prone to make these thinking errors, and under some conditions more so than others, and that if you filter this into your thinking process as you're going through the levels of choice and your decision wheel, you can correct, and make some changes in your thinking, which can improve your outcomes. So here's a little formula for steps to problem solving. The first step is to select the problem and establish a goal that you want to achieve, and then engage in a little brainstorming, so that you can generate options, and to really sit back and not be critical or judge, those potential options, and just let them kind of flow and come. Then you can sit back and evaluate them more critically, so you can utilize your critical thinking skills. And you could select the most promising option and then implement it. See what happens. Experiment a little bit. And then again, evaluate and see what the outcome is, and if it is something that you are pleased with, or if there's room to still improve some more. So you review and consider the original problem in the light of how it turned out. And, you can make adjustments, so you can return to implement a different option or a different cognition of choice if you were dissatisfied with that particular outcome. So when applying the cognitions of choice, what I would recommend is that you first review each of these different cognitions of choice, and you identify which one is appealing to you, which one seems appropriate to the situation and might be helpful in challenging any kind of barrier thinking or those thinking errors that we just reviewed. Then you experiment and utilize a trial and error method. And you want to just find the lowest entry point where you feel safe to apply this cognition of choice, because you're going to make some changes in behavior. And there's always consequences as you change. Sometimes, friends or family members don't like it when you change because they get used to you being a certain way. And so they may, kind of react. And it's really important that you stay the course and that you work on building the confidence to be able to do that, so that you can gradually begin to experience change within yourself and develop your choices. And so, as I said, you gain experience with using these cognitions of choice, and you will get more confident. The other thing it will allow you as you experiment a little bit, you get a little more tolerant of feeling anxious about these changes, so that you can stay in it a little bit longer, and increase your ability to have exposure to that which you were previously uncomfortable with. So when you define where's that desired level of comfort, you can expand it. You can go out into other relationships or other settings with your new behavior and try it on for size. Then you sit back and observe again, and is there enough changes going on in a single behavior or thought or feeling? Or you want to expand it out to look at some more pattern type thinking and feeling. And you start to track your behavioral changes and the choices you're making, so that you can adapt even further, or you can make some minor changes as you need to. So you apply these steps, you experiment with the cognitions of choice, and you determine what's the most useful application of which cognition of choice that you're experimenting with. So when we're working at that level 1, where we're inviting change, we're usually focused on those automatic thoughts that come up very quickly. And sometimes they're unwanted thoughts. And so we want to focus on developing new skills and acquiring new skills. And so the steps in this case is that we are going to be reviewing, identifying, and experimenting with a particular cognition of choice. And the idea is that through rehearsal, we learn. And so we allow ourselves the freedom to be able to rehearse, make mistakes, adjust, adapt, and every time that automatic thought comes up, if it's a negative thought, we want to challenge it and replace it with a more positive thought. So we review, we identify, and we experiment. Now, there are some automatic thoughts that come up that are useful because they're a part of the pattern behavior that allows us to be very efficient in the way we use our brain. And that's a good thing. The second approach here involves investigation. So we're really operating from that second level of choice. And we're thinking about our thinking and thinking about our feeling. That's what the meta entails. And at this stage, we're focusing on developing strategies that will allow us to be much more efficient in our approach to choice. And that's really what the cognitions of choice allow us to be, is more efficient. So at this point, the steps are that we're gaining more experience, we're increasing our tolerance for the discomfort we might feel around anxiety, and we find comfort in the fact that we have created a philosophy for living around this new cognition of choice that we're applying, or in some cases, cognitions of choice, more than one. And so the learning approach here is that we're maintaining our new learning and we're preparing to be able to take it on the road, so to speak, and try it in different environments. And so our third level is initiation. We've now got some confidence behind us, we've got some skill behind us, and so we're able to assert ourselves and try this behavior out, this cognition of choice, in new environments. And we're much more conscious in the way that we are responding to choice. So we're focusing on developing these dispositional traits. We're expanding outward, we're observing our possible changes, and we're experimenting with the most useful application of this cognition of choice in different environments. So we're being able to generalize what new choices we have made. So the approach to processing, is, as I said, kind of a levels approach, where the level one is on focus on automatic thought, where we're inviting change and we're developing new skills. The secondary level is focus on meta, thinking and feeling, and how we think and feel and connect to our thoughts and feelings. And we are now investigating, and we're focused on developing strategies for making choices. And that third level, as we go deeper, we're focused on conscious thought, and we're creating conscious choices. We're starting to initiate, and we're really focused on developing this philosophy for living and these traits that allow us to incorporate that into our personality or our disposition. So the cognitions of choice. Now today, as I said, I wanted to focus on the ability to consider options. The motto is there are always options. And the definition is that we have the right and power for freedom to choose after other possibilities have been ruled out. And so how I would recommend using this is that if you're in a situation where you want to change something, maybe you're a little bit fearful about the change, you can use this approach to remind yourself in a mnemonic sense that you need to consider your options. You need to be able to give yourself permission to do that. And that by considering your options, you open that choice portal. And so you can utilize your decision wheels, and you can utilize this particular cognition of choice in a way to train your brain to respond, differently, where you look at the situation and you remind yourself to consider your options. And so you stop your processing long enough to be able to insert this particular dispositional trait, to consider your options and to open choice and that portal of choice. Now, it sounds ridiculously simple, but sometimes simplicity is best, and that's what we really need, is to be able to cut through all the complexity of the brain that is rapidly firing and just slow it down enough to consider, what are my choices? To talk to yourself as if you are your best friend, and to remind yourself that you have choices and that you have various options. Even when you feel backed into a corner, you truthfully still have options. And by reminding yourself that you have options, you are able to empower yourself and take more control over your choices. So we want to start to integrate this cognition of choice and use it to really change our way of being. And as we take this approach with each of the cognitions of choice, that they become their own mnemonic and they become a reminder for us in the way we make choices and our way of being. So we can, keep a track of what are the pros and cons of utilizing each of these cognitions of choice. And today we're focused on considering options. What are the pros of considering my options? Really nothing bad is going to come from considering your options. Are there any cons to considering your options? Well, if you apply it to a very specific situation, then yes, maybe there are some pros and maybe there are some cons in considering options. But you could look at, for example, do I want to move, to a new house? You could look at the pros of maybe having a more comfortable space, or perhaps a larger space, or maybe a more affordable space, or a friendlier environment, or any number of things. And then you could look at the cons, which could be the reverse of any of those, And so sometimes just going through and taking apart a thought or a choice allows us to slow that brain down enough to insert choice. And so here's another way to track our use of a cognition of choice. We could look at a triggering event or a situation and record it. What environment did it happen in? What thoughts came up automatically? How did I feel when I had that thought? And what choices are available to me? And in this case, the cognition of choice is considering my options. And I can then go back and rate on a scale of 1 to 100, and you can decide is 100 the best, but what was the outcome? Did it come out the way I wanted it to? And am I developing a new choice out of this situation as a result of applying my cognition of choice? We can also, reverse engineer something, and look at our processing from reviewing, And so again, reminder that automatic level of thinking usually involves a focus on inviting choice. We're using skills development and we're practicing rehearsal. Level 2, we're focused on thinking about our thinking and thinking about our feelings. We're starting to investigate and open that choice portal a little more by developing strategies and maintaining the new learning. And by moving to level 3, we're at a much more conscious level where we're initiating choice. We're creating or developing these dispositional traits, and we're focused on generalizing or trying our skills out in new environments so that we can not only maintain it, but we can develop more choices. And so, the whole point of the cognitions of choice is for you to design your own philosophy for living and go through them, each of them, and decide which ones really speak to you and under what circumstances would they be beneficial to use. And so you can restructure your goals as you go through. The initial point of the cognitions of choice, as I've said before, is inviting choice or change, and you can utilize those aspirational goals. And as you move to a deeper level and you become more able to investigate, you can institute more measurable goals. And as you change your behavior, change your thinking and your feelings as they connect to these different choices, it starts to become more the automatic thought. So you've replaced a negative automatic thinking process and you've integrated a more positive or mindful approach to your choice making as you start to initiate choice. So the golden rule is, it is a simple reminder that the importance of life is that we want to respect living beings, ourselves included, And, by using these cognitions of choice, we can create balance and we can create harmony in our life. So just simply reminding yourself to not hurt yourself, not let anyone hurt you, and not to hurt anyone else. That's the golden rule. And we want to utilize emotional management in these 4 steps here of being aware of our emotions, accepting our self as we are and our emotional way of being, making adjustments as we need to, and taking action so that we can maintain health. So this simple 4-step approach to managing emotions is extremely effective. So in ending here, I think it could be useful, to document your desired philosophy for living and, applying your new cognition of choice, considering your options. I think about my options, which causes me to feel more optimistic. Consequently, I make healthier choices. I actually believe I am capable of making healthy choices. My belief allows me to feel strong. I am committed to wellness and making healthy choices. You can fill in the blanks whatever way it works for you. This is just an example that I'm providing here. And I hope this was beneficial for you to learn a little bit about the cognition of choice, considering your options. And I thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to working with you as we explore some of the other cognitions of choice. Take care now and have a great, great day.